It's been over a year since I last played Mafia: The Old Country, and I quite enjoyed it back then thanks to its compact nature, decent combat, and stealth mechanics, but most importantly, its story. Suffice it to say, it ultimately became one of my favorite gaming experiences of 2025. A year later, Hangar 13 has returned to the game with a new DLC, Man of Honor, which adds 2 more chapters to Enzo's journey alongside additional content for free ride mode. And there's quite a bit here that fans of the original are going to appreciate, but let's start with the elephant in the room, the story expansion. Man of Honor takes place after Enzo Favara has earned his place within the Teresi crime family. Rather than go further back into Enzo's past, it fills in an earlier period of his time as a soldado while introducing Ennio Salieri, a character who we will be instantly familiar with to anyone who has played the first Mafia. Don Teresi and Salieri have some history, and when the latter comes to him looking to settle a personal matter, the Don gives his approval and ropes Enzo and Cesare into helping him. Salieri's ultimate goal is simple: earn enough money to leave Sicily behind and start a new life in America. As a result, Man of Honor places much more emphasis on Salieri than Enzo, with the latter essentially serving as the vehicle through which the expansion sets up Salieri's future. The voice acting and cutscene direction are, as you would expect from a Mafia game, solid throughout. Salieri comes across as sharp, selfish, and quick-witted, someone more than willing to use others to get what he wants, and that side of his personality is reflected throughout the expansion. Now, I won't go too deeply into the story beyond saying that it's a decent, if ultimately straightforward tale built around one of the Mafia's most fundamental rules: you don't cross the dawn. It wraps up rather quickly and respects your time with a conclusion that is largely satisfying, even if much of what happens is fairly easy to see coming. Lasting around 2 hours, Man of Honor feels, from a gameplay perspective, like a direct continuation of its base game. It delivers some excellent set pieces, including a chase sequence, several stealth sections, and action-heavy moments that eventually erupt into outright combat. If what you wanted was simply more Mafia: The Old Country, well, then Man of Honor provides exactly that, which also means it carries over both the strengths and shortcomings of that base experience. Combat remains effective, though relatively simple and straightforward, while stealth once again follows the "if it isn't broken, don't fix it" approach. Even traversal remains familiar, whether you're traveling on horseback or driving classic vehicles. Coincidentally, these are all things that I enjoyed about the base game, so returning to them a year later was surprisingly satisfying. Now that said, if you didn't enjoy The Old Country the first time around, there is little here that is going to change your mind. This is an expansion, rather than a major reworking of its mechanics. But for players who loved that base game, it provides an engaging afternoon's worth of familiar Mafia gameplay without overstaying its welcome or pretending to be something radically different. That is, until the compulsory instant fail stealth sections come into play. There is one particular set piece during the concluding events of Man of Honor where you simply cannot be detected, because the moment an enemy spots you, it is instant game over. And look, I get it, sometimes a game needs to impose a strict no detection requirement, but the systems built around such a restriction also need to be engaging enough, well, to justify it. Take Splinter Cell Chaos Theory just for example, where the mechanics support those restrictions by giving you plenty of tools and gadgets to experiment with and work around different situations. In a game like Mafia, however, a section like this feels forced because the stealth mechanics simply are not deep enough to make that kind of limitation particularly enjoyable, and it ultimately pulled me out of the experience. Now, fortunately, this sequence only lasts for several minutes, but in an expansion this short, I still think that it's worth pointing out. I also came across a few minor bugs here and there, including one during a chase sequence where Enzo's animation suddenly went haywire and became stuck. It wasn't anything game-breaking, but it did stand out, especially since I don't recall encountering similar issues during my time with the base game. Once you're done with the story, Man of Honor also expands the game's free ride mode with a number of Salieri-related missions, where he essentially acts as a quest giver to Enzo from his warehouse. Now, to be transparent, I hadn't experienced free ride before this since it was added after the game's original release, but Salieri's side tasks give the mode a little more narrative weight, especially since they provide additional background on his motivations and just how desperately he wants to make his way to America.
Here I was thinking you'd be happy to see me. For a chance to explain yourself! Please! All this just so we could talk. My money. Where is it?
Look around! I sank everything into this mine. I don't have it.
You don't have it,
And again, these tasks largely follow the structure of missions from the base game, whether that means stealth-based infiltration, procuring valuable items, stealing vehicles, or completing the kinds of objectives you already encounter throughout the campaign. The expansion also adds more weapons, knives, clothing options, and various items with effects that can influence combat encounters out in the actual field. Now, I like what Hangar 13 has done with Freeride here because it makes the world feel more worthwhile to explore by giving you more reasons to engage with it. But my only question is whether some of this content could have been integrated more naturally into the story itself, which would have made the overall experience feel more connected. But regardless, Man of Honor improves Freeride by making its existing world denser with engaging activities rather than simply increasing the size of the map. For what it's worth, Mafia: The Old Country Man of Honor costs $9.99, which I think is a fair price for the experience that it offers. There's a reasonable argument that the expansion could have focused more on Enzo's backstory rather than inserting a side story into the base game's narrative, but I do feel that Hangar 13 is making an effort to connect the Old Country to the larger Mafia timeline, and so far, I think that approach is working well. I appreciate Enzo's characterization in the base game and would still love to see more added to his story if Hangar 13 has further content that is planned. And as it stands though, Man of Honor is a reasonable expansion of the base game experience, sticking closely to what already worked rather than trying to reinvent it. And for an add-on of this size and price, I think that's all it needs to do.
And that'll be about it for this one. If you guys like what we're doing at Gaming Vault, please consider subscribing to our channel, and I'll see you guys on the next video.